Hey guys, so today is going to be a little more of a casual video. Normally I'd be coming at you with a tutorial. However, I haven't made a bracelet in like over a year, so I feel like it might not be a great thing to jump into and try and teach people how to do. Thought maybe I should just sit, you know what, make a bracelet, and why not just answer some of the most asked questions I am asked myself. I have seen places. I just thought that was a great place to start. So, well, I'm just gonna sit here and make this bracelet. I'm gonna go through 10 of the most asked questions that I see. They aren't really in like this is the number one most asked question I get. I haven't really done them that way. So we're just gonna, I guess, hop into it. So the first question that I often hear, I'm new to the hobby or I want to get into the hobby, I want to learn how to do this. Where do I start? Well, now that YouTube is a thing, YouTube is a great resource to learn pretty much anything. And I would suggest everyone try and learn, you know, new stuff all the time. It just keeps your brain fresh and sharp. And that being said, you can find a lot of great tutorials on YouTube. In fact, you can go on my channel, Candy Stripe Bracelet and Arrowhead Bracelets. I explain, you know, in a lot of detail how to do the different knots and stuff. So that would be a great place to start. Always use whatever resources you have available. And that YouTube is one that a lot of people have readily available. Obviously, you're on it right now if you're watching this. Alternately though, when I learned how to make these, YouTube was not yet in existence. So I actually used a book, and I'll try and find a picture of it because I have since given it away to a younger girl who was trying to learn, really wanted to learn how to make friendship bracelets. And the book was just called Friendship Bracelets, and it was by Camillia Grysky, I believe. Like I said, I'll try and find a picture and post it here. It was a great resource. It had a number of patterns in it. It had instructions. It had a little bit of history on the friendship bracelet. It had colored diagrams, and that was a great way to learn. For me, I tried to learn from friends and it didn't really work, but actually sitting and reading the instructions and seeing the diagrams really helped me to understand how to make bracelets. So if, you know, sitting and watching YouTube, you know, maybe you only get a certain amount of screen time a day if you're maybe younger. And maybe pop by your library, your local library, and see what they have. It'll probably be in like the nonfiction section somewhere. See what they have. You might find that they have a couple different friendship bracelet books there. Or alternately, maybe you find a different how-to book for something else you want to learn, like knitting or crochet or something. So that is the number one question I get asked, and that is how I would suggest getting into the hobby. You can also check out the forums and stuff too. They generally have tutorials on how to get into it, how to read patterns, how to tie your knots, that sort of thing. The second question I get asked is how many strings do I need? And that differs for every single pattern that you do. When you're reading your pattern, if you're reading an alpha pattern, it'll generally say at the top, you know, 17 by 100 and whatever. 17 is the number of strings that you would need base-wise, because that's the number of knots going across, plus 1 for your knotting string. So if you're looking at an alpha pattern, again, that's whatever that number is, plus 1 for your knotting string. And it'll generally state somewhere on the website at the top of the pattern. If you're getting it as like a screen grab from somewhere, or you're trying to use a cross stitch pattern as a bracelet pattern, you could just count it out, how wide the pattern is, and add 1 for your knotting string. Alternately, if you're working with a normal pattern, it'll tell you the amount of strings, and you don't need to add a knotting string for that. It should just be the amount that's there. And if you fold your strings in half, remember that 2 strings on your pattern of the same color are gonna be 1 string. So for me, this pattern, if I'm just making an arrowhead pattern, this pattern would show up on a normal pattern and it might say 8 strings. However, it's 2 purple, 2 blue, 2 gray, 2 green. So I'm just gonna make my strings double the length and fold them in half so I have the loop at the top to anchor my bracelet. But that will change every bracelet you make, so there is no definitive answer for that. The third question I get asked is, what is an alpha pattern and what is a normal pattern? So a normal pattern is what I'm doing right now, and I'm pretty sure this is kind of the traditional, like historically traditional ways that friendship bracelets have been made, and they're mostly done in designs and stuff. However, over time, they have evolved so you can put pictures and words into bracelets, and that is something that looks more like this. Your strings go back and forth, and you can put a picture in there as opposed to knotting like this. So when you're making a bracelet like this, this is the bracelet, relating back to the last question, that you'd want to do however many strings it says, +1 for knotting. Whereas a normal pattern is something like this, or something like I'm making here, where you don't have to add an additional string in. It is exactly how many the pattern says. How do you come up with what colors to use? This is a question I see on forums and stuff all the time. Like, oh, what are some color combination suggestions? How do you come up with what colors to use? I try to take inspiration from all around me. So if there's, let's say, a picture that I really like, I'll pull some colors from it. If there's a piece of clothing that I really like that has a design on it, I'll try and pull colors from that. Alternately, you know, like just things like that, like a design, or find an inspiration. Maybe you like nature, so maybe you can do, you know, different greens and browns for like the trees, or you can do different blues for like the ocean, that sort of thing. Also, if you really running dry on inspiration, if you've been making bracelets as long as I have, sometimes the color combinations just come to you. Sometimes you feel like you're repeating yourself. And there is a great website I found way back when I was dabbling in HTML, like coding, and it's called colorlovers.net, I believe. I'll link to it in the description, and I'll put it on the screen to make sure I have that right. But it basically has a whole bunch of patterns and color palettes that other people have made up, and they post on there. So that could give you some inspiration too, where you literally just go through and you find a color palette or a pattern that you like and draw the colors from there. And it's a really great resource. I've definitely used it more than once to create a bracelet and get ideas for, you know, what colors I should use. So the 5th question I get asked is, what kind of string do you use? And for me, that kind of changes. Generally, I just buy the large packs at like Walmart or Michael's, and the brand changes. They change it all the time. The only thing I won't buy is I don't like craft string. I don't like the way it looks, and I find it breaks easier. I also don't typically use stuff from the dollar store because I find a couple things. I find they're generally not dyed as well. So when you're using it, like I used to get black and white from the dollar store because they're some of the most common colors that you run out of. And I used to find that I'd make a bracelet and my white string, if I was using the black and the white together, my white string would start to look gray, and my hands would also look like really dirty after I had finished making a bracelet. So there was definitely dye transfer, and I just found it snapped really easy. And that's the same as the crochet thread. Or not crochet thread, sorry, the craft thread. So whenever I see that it's craft thread, I just stay away from it. But lots of people use different strings. You don't even have to use embroidery floss. Some people use wax thread. Some people use yarn. You can use pretty much whatever. You could even use regular thread if you wanted to. I've never actually tried that. I feel like it would cut into your fingers a lot and you'd risk snapping it, but I mean, I suppose it could be done if you wanted a really dainty looking, delicate friendship bracelet. Maybe I'll try that sometime. If you guys want to see me try that sometime to see what it'll look like, let me know down below. The next question I get asked is, how long do I make my strings, or how do I know how long to make my strings? And I actually just finished filming a video about this, so it should be up by the time this video goes up. I'll leave a link for it in the cards and in the description box. Basically, I made a huge mathematical formula that actually tells you for sure what the perfect length of string is, but it's a lot of math, and I generally don't use it. I typically hold the skein of thread in one hand, and with my other hand I pull this until I spread my arms as wide as they will go, and then depending on the pattern, I'll sometimes add a little bit extra if there's a color that I know is going to be used more, or just to have a little bit of extra, just kind of, you know, to ease my mind a bit. The next question I get asked a lot, or I see a lot in the forums. I don't always get asked this personally, but I see it a lot come up in the forums, and that's the edge of my bracelets are wavy, or my bracelet curls, or my bracelet curves. Sometimes this can be a result of how the pattern is made. If you have a lot of knots going in one direction and then random knots going the opposite direction, sometimes it can cause, like, even if your bracelet is lying flat, the physical bracelet can curve like this. Actually, that is a problem with one of the very first patterns I ever made. It's like a watermelon pattern. You can find it on my bracelet book profile, but that's like the number one thing people say in the comments about it. And for patterns like that, if you're using the same color on the same colored knot, you can just change up the direction of the knot, or try a forwards backwards knot, backwards forwards. That'll kind of even it out a bit so you don't get that curving effect. As far as curling goes, that's generally a gauge thing, same as a wavy edge. Generally speaking, it's you're tying your knots at different gauges, like different tightnesses, so your knots aren't the same size all the way across, which is going to make the edge of your product look wavy because some rows are going to be bigger than others. Alternately, not all embroidery floss is 6 strands. And if you don't know what I mean by 6 strands, basically if you take a look at your embroidery floss, and I can show you here. So your typical embroidery floss has, as you can see there, hopefully that's focusing for you, but there's 6 threads that make up this piece of floss. Sometimes, depending on the brands, and I've had this happen with the big packs, and because I've bought strings from so many different places, some brands will have a different amount of string in it, which means some brands may have 5 strings, some brands may have 7, some brands may have 6. But that also means that your string is varying in size. So if you've got one color that you're using as, let's say, a background color in an alpha bracelet, all those knots are going to be ever so slightly smaller than, you know, whatever you're doing your font in or whatnot. And in that case, I mean, there isn't really anything you can do but be more careful next time. Make sure everything is, you know, kosher. It's all the same size. That can also cause that rippling effect as well. It can also cause your pattern to kind of be raised from the rest of your bracelet, which is another thing I see people complain about in the forums all the time. So keep in mind your tension, always your tension. Try and practice and practice and practice. That's the only way you're going to get your knots to be the same size. And that goes for any string craft, really. Knitting, crochet, all of that. Tension is huge. So just practice and practice until you get it. I find generally when I was having tension issues before, when I started, generally trying to tie a little bit looser always helped for me, and I found that kind of made me find this happy medium. But yeah, those are generally the reasons that I find people have wavy bracelets. Now, how can you fix it if you have one and you like it? I mean, you can try ironing it, or you can try washing it a few times. The iron may force it flat. I'm not sure. Or alternately, like I said, you could try washing it a few times, which will loosen up the fibers and generally just the bracelet in general, which could cause it to lay more flat. Otherwise, my answer would be make a new bracelet, as unfortunate as that is. Or maybe not, you'd get the practice out of it. How do I secure a knotted color change? And this comes up on my multicolor alpha tutorial all the time. I also see it in the forums. I also see it in my string was too short. How do I add in another color? Or how do I add in more string? And the shorter the answer is, some people secure those color changes. And what I mean by that is in like an alpha bracelet like this, where you have all these color changes in here, the back looks like this. Now, where you'd maybe want to consider securing, or some people do, is these spots here. Those are just spots where, you know, you're done with this red, you can cut it off, or you're done with it for a large enough section, you can cut it off. Some people will use a dab of glue. Some people will use nail polish. I don't use anything, and I've never had a bracelet fall apart on me. The one thing you have to remember is, as much as, and I don't know why people seem to forget this, people seem to say like, well, how do I end a bookmark? How do I do this? Guys, a bracelet is made up of knots. It is macrame. It's made up of knots, which means if I were to just cut this off here, the bracelet would not fall apart because it's made up completely of knots. So by that logic, these ends aren't going to fall out because the entire thing is made up of knots. So I just cut it as close to the bracelet as possible, and I've never had a bracelet fall apart. And that's generally when I wear them. I'll wear them for a long time as well. Sometimes a year, sometimes 6 months, sometimes more than a year. So to me, I don't put anything on mine. I just cut them as close to the bracelet as I can, which is using, like, if you have a little nail kit with like your miniature scissors in there, or if you have a sewing kit with the thread scissors, those work great. And if you're on a budget and you really don't know what to do, nail clippers get in there really close as well, and just right flat to the back of the bracelet so you don't feel it as a lump on the back. But otherwise, I don't secure with anything. Some people do. The other question I get asked is, can you back a bracelet with something? And this isn't one of my 10 questions, but I mean, yeah, I suppose so. I never have, but I imagine you could sew a piece of felt or fabric onto the back or fabric glue it. I have no idea the longevity of that, if it would fall off, or I mean, if you sew it, I don't think it would, but I don't know because I don't do it. But you definitely could if you wanted to. The next question, number 9, we're almost done these questions, is how do I wash my bracelets? I've washed my bracelets over the years a couple different ways. I have there's what I consider a deep clean method, and then there's what I consider my lazy method. So if I notice a bracelet I've been wearing is starting to look kind of gross, and let's be honest here, everyone always asks, is there a smell? If you wear your bracelet all the time, does it fade? Yes, over time, a long enough time, it will fade because of, not even because of anything, just sun exposure will fade a color in anything. That's why if you ever left a toy outside when you were a kid, it kind of changed color. It didn't look the same. It got sun bleached. Also, if you go swimming or have it in water a lot, the chlorines and chemicals in that, or if you're cleaning a lot, that's going to fade your bracelet over time. Now, as far as smells go, there's nothing strong enough that you're going to be like, oh my gosh, something smells. But after an extended period of time, if you take your bracelet and put your nose on it and smell, it's kind of going to have that slightly wet dog sort of smell. I know that's not pleasant and no one wants to hear that, but when that happens, generally before that happens, I clean my bracelets. And how I do it is sometimes I'll just do it when I'm in the shower. So I'll untie my bracelets before I get in the shower, and I'll throw them all in there, and I will just scrub them with like my body wash and my loofah, something that's exfoliating that will, you know, get off whatever dead skin cells are probably hanging out there, whatever dirt might be got down in between the knots, you know, whatever is on the bracelet that shouldn't be on the bracelet. I find the loofah kind of scrubs it all out. And then you know, use whatever cleaner you want. I just used my body wash or shampoo, but you could use laundry soap, or you could use dish soap, or, you know, whatever. You could also use, like, I imagine a scrub brush might be a little hard on it, but you could probably get away with it once or twice. Just like a scrub brush and some dish soap or whatever. Alternately, you can get a laundry bag, which is like a little, I don't have one here, but I have used them before. They are excellent for washing your bracelets with minimal effort. And they're like a little mesh bag. They're generally used for delicates like bras, underwear, like lingerie, those sort of things. They're also called lingerie bags. They're like a mesh bag, and they generally have a zipper closure on them. And the idea behind them is that they keep your delicates from getting caught on other items in the wash and snagging and getting pulls, etc., that will ruin the item, the garment. So if you throw your bracelets in one of those, because if you don't, you might lose it to the same abyss that all of our socks go missing to. But if you throw a bunch of bracelets in one of those and just wash it with your normal laundry, dry it in the dryer with your laundry, they'll come out really clean, generally a bit brighter as well, especially if you throw some OxyClean in there. That would be my ideal way to clean them. However, generally these days I don't wear a bracelet long enough that I'm like scrubbing it clean unless I visibly see something on it. In fact, I haven't worn a bracelet in a very, very long time. So also why someone asked if I could show my bracelet collection. My bracelet collection is kind of lacking because I actually gave a bunch of them to my boyfriend's younger sister. So now my collection is significantly smaller, and I haven't made bracelets in like at least a year until today. So my bracelet collection isn't very big right now. And the last question that I frequently get asked is, how do I tie my bracelet on? So this is generally not always from people who are making them. Sometimes from people who are making them, but mostly from people that I've given them to. They just don't understand how to tie them on. And obviously, if you put fancy ties on your bracelet, that's a whole different story. I got a few different ties that I use, but like this is my basic sort of thing with a loop and just a tie on the end. So I'll show you how I do this. I put my bracelet out flat with the bottom facing up, and I put my wrist down on top of it like so. And then I take my tie end and I'm going to put it through my loop either way. Whether you come in from the front or the back doesn't matter. You're just going to put your end through the loop, make a loop here like this. Hopefully you can see that. If I let it go, it will undo. And then just pull this end through that hole like that and pull tight. And that's how I tie them on. So for these ones, the idea is that they're removable. So they have a hole here and a hole here. And you put your end through this loop from the front side in towards your wrist, like that. And then you pull it back this way and push it through this hole. And the idea is that the knot is big enough to make it stay there. So, yeah, it depends on the tie on your bracelet, but typically you just tie it in a knot. And that is all the questions I have to round out the top 10 questions I most frequently get asked. I mean, I don't mind helping people out. So if you guys have questions, maybe something isn't going right with your bracelet, you can't understand a certain pattern, you want to see a certain pattern done, maybe just reading the pattern doesn't work for you, let me know down below. Like this video if you like these frequently asked questions, this casual kind of just watch me make a bracelet and, you know, chat about stuff. Let me know down below, and like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. All right, guys, I will talk to you all later. Bye.